Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. We are continuing this lesson in the Ship of Salvation. We are on section 7a in Sheikh Fayez Qurashi, who also translates on the name of Fayez bin Amir. In his translation, we discussed previously 3 things allow for the earth ablution tayammum. The first of them being the loss of water, and the second of them being illness. In this lesson, we will cover illness. And you remember that we mentioned the real cause that allows tayammum in our previous lesson. And we said that the real cause that allows tayammum is al-ajiz an isti'mal al-ma' hissan aw shar'an. The real cause that allows tayammum is an inability to use water legally or physically, or actually in other order, physically or legally. So an absolute lack of water, that is physically being unable to use water. Illness is an example of a legal cause of inability, meaning that someone who is harmed by using water, the sacred law grants them as a dispensation the inability to use it, and thus they use earth and perform an earth ablution or a dry ablution. And for most of us in the developed world, or we could say in developed countries where water is prevalent, this will be the reason that we perform tayammum. This is also one of the difficult questions in the Shafi'i school, though it is a dispensation. It is one of the difficult questions in the Shafi'i school. They say that tayammum is min aqabat al-fiqh. It's from the difficult hurdles in the law. And there's some detail here. Inshallah, bear with us. By the barakah of this blessed text, As-Safina, and the commentary, Nail al-Raja, this will become opened up. So first of all, illness. What is the illness or harm that allows tayammum? And the fuqaha term this mahdhur tayammum, right? Mahdhur tayammum. So that means something you're wary of that allows tayammum, right? So you are afraid of an illness, you're afraid of some harm, you're wary about those. So that allows tayammum. In summary, it is 4 things. It's an illness. You're going to get sick or infected, like a wound become infected. And that means an illness that is anticipated, it's feared, or it is present. So if someone fears illness, life, limb, because they're already sick, or they anticipating getting sick. And it doesn't have to be a fatal illness, right? It is Sheikh Ibn Hajar in At-Tuhfa, he says, an illness that has an impact, a substantial illness, not just like a light headache or light pain, but like it's substantial, right? So you fear either a present or anticipated illness. That's the first thing. The second is an increase of the said illness. You're already sick and you anticipate it getting worse. Prolongation of the said illness. You're sick. If you're using water, you fear it'll take a long time to heal. Or for example, if you have a lesion, right, and you keep getting it wet, it may take longer to heal. So you fear prolongation. And the fourth is a severe blemish on a visible limb. severe blemish on a visible limb, and that specifically is like scarring, discoloration, what have you. And that last one, there's another definition they give. What is considered a visible limb? A visible limb is what is typically exposed when doing chores. And this gives you an idea of the modesty of the Sharia, right? Typically, a modest person who has means will cover, in the case of a woman, almost all of her body. In the case of a man, much or most of his body. So the Sharia says what is typically exposed, though, when doing chores, and this is a definition that will be applied in other chapters, ma yabdu inda al-mahna. It's the head and the neck, the arms up to the biceps, and the legs up to the knees, right? So, someone roll up their sleeves, roll up their pants, mop a floor, whatever. Those are considered your visible or exposed limbs. So a blemish on that's going to show to everybody. So that's more grave than a blemish on a covered area. So again, four things constitute the illness or harm that you're wary of, that you fear, and that will allow you to do tayammum, earth ablution. You fear an illness present or anticipated, increase of that illness, prolongation of that illness, or a blemish on a visible limb. So if someone has that, you can make tayammum. The Sharia allows you to make tayammum if you fear use of water, one of those things. And then what do you base this on? How do you know this? How do you arrive at this knowledge? You arrive at this knowledge by your experience, meaning you know your body and you know your medical condition, and you know that water in this case is going to cause one of those four things that are feared, or you are informed by a trustworthy doctor, right? So a doctor tells you, if you use water on this area that I just put stitches on, for example, you're going to have an ugly scar. It's going to take longer to heal, or you're going to have an ugly scar, for example. Then that would be an excuse not to wash that area with water and to make tayammum instead. Someone who has neither of those, they neither have experience or access to a trustworthy doctor, and they just believe there's a possibility of harm, so they make tayammum. That is permissible in the view of Ibn Hajar, not Imam Ramli. And in Ibn Hajar's view, if they do that, they have to make up those prayers. La ilaha illallah. Then what about someone who fears use of water on a portion of their body, not all of their body? So for example, someone who has an injury on their foot and they need to purify themselves. They need to make wudu or ghusl. What they do is they do tayammum to make up for what they cannot wash at the time when they would have washed that area that is injured or sick, right? So when would that be? In the case of an injury on the foot, when is the time for washing the foot? After the head. They would do tayammum after their head. In the case of ghusl, they would do tayammum whenever they wanted, because the whole body is one limb, right? The whole body is one part for ghusl. But for wudu, if the injury were on their face, they'd do tayammum at the time of washing the face. If the injury were on their arm, they'd do tayammum at the time of washing their arm, and so on. The head's unlikely because you only have to wipe a very small part of the head. So unless they had the whole head covered, there wouldn't be an issue there. In the case of the foot, they do tayammum at the time of washing the foot. So when you are doing tayammum, because you are not able to wash your whole body, when do you do it? You do it at the time, meaning the point in the sequence of that purifying bath or wudu. You do it at that point in the sequence. The face, the arm, the head, the foot, in the case of wudu, or any part of the body, in the case of ghusl, and the whole body is one part, right? La ilaha illallah. So that is the most likely scenario for many of us. Most of us are going to do tayammum because we have a cast, or we have stitches, or we have a cut, and it's covered. When are we going to do it? We're going to do it at the time we would have washed that limb, right? And then when we have a covering, a cast, a dressing, a bandage, etc., stitches, the covered part of the body. If we have a covering on a part that is washed for wudu or ghusl, in 3 scenarios, we have to remove the covering. So like a lot of the band-aids we put on, technically you're probably gonna have to remove those for wudu. A lot of times, because a lot of times we just put a band-aid on if it's not a very important cut, right? As opposed to like a dressing that your go to the emergency room and they put a dressing on to cover stitches or some, severe lesion or burn or whatever. A lot of times we're not going to be able to remove those dressings, but a dressing that can be removed must be in 3 scenarios. Meaning that if you can wash what's under it with water, meaning you can wash it without fearing what was mentioned before. Illness, prolongation, increase, or a scar. The second is you can't wash it, but you covered an area that can be washed unnecessarily. And what does this say? What is this telling us? This telling us that when you're going to cover an area of wudu, only cover as much as necessary for it to protect that, whatever the lesion is, whatever the cut is under it, and to adhere properly. If you cover more than you're supposed to, you have to remove that. It also means that, those of us that serve knowledge and those of us that serve medicine have to have some communication, because, we have to, people who are doing medicine for Muslims should understand these rulings. And those of us who are able to communicate these rulings should have a relationship and some dawah to those that are involved in medicine, because we need them in this question and we need them in many questions. So that's the second. They covered some of what is healthy and could be washed unnecessarily. And then thirdly, the covering is in one of the parts of body where they make tayammum, and they are able to make tayammum over the injured area, even if they weren't able to wash it with water. So that means they had a covering on their face or their finger or their arms up to their elbows, and they're able to wipe that area with, a little bit of dust on their hands. They're able to wipe their hand over it. In that case, they would have to remove it. And so like a lot of us, something we put a Band-Aid on, we probably could remove it in these circumstances. Now, when one is unable to remove a covering in order to wash it, or because it's covering too much, or because it's on an area of tayammum, when one is unable to remove it, what does one do? One washes everything that one can. So let's say I had a covering on my arm, right? Let's say I had a broken arm and I have a cast. And let's say that cast goes halfway up my forearm, but not to my elbow. What would I do? I would begin the normal wudu, all my sunnahs of wudu before the face, wash the face with a normal intention for wudu, wash as much of the broken arm as I could, wipe over the cast, make tayammum at that point, and then keep on going and finish wudu. And then in a case like this, where you are doing tayammum because of a covering of one of the limbs, the areas that is washed in wudu, there are scenarios that we will cover in our next lesson, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us to be pure and also purifying, and benefit from al-Habib al-Mustafa al-Masadi, the one who is sent with this pure and magnanimous and righteous Sharia, that facilitates for us this dispensation of tayammum. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.